This is the consideration of a draft report on the implementation of the Common Market Organization regulation in fisheries and aquaculture. This is an own initiative report which was given to the Renew Group back in March of 2023, and Renew assigned as Rapporteur Izaskun Bilbao. So I now will be giving the floor to Ms. Bilbao to introduce this point.
Muchas gracias, presidente.
Well, thank you, Chair. This is in line with Article 48 of the CMO regulation. As such, on the 21st of February 2023, we had the report agreed on, and we went to react to this. So we welcome the progress which has been made in the implementation of CMO regulation in this area. However, we do still need further efforts to ensure there's information for consumers. We need to improve labelling and market transparency. We want to increase traceability for fisheries and agriculture products, and this needs to be a central tool in the fight against IUU fishing. We need to build consumer trust in these products, and also ensure better commercialisation of these products. We need to ensure fair competition for all fishers and aquaculture operators. So this is a very good news. We have at the end of the negotiations on the controls regulation, which will strengthen traceability, but perhaps some of the timelines are slightly longer than we were hoped for. Now, on producer organisations, I think these are the bedrock of the fisheries and agriculture sector. They have a vital role when it comes to contributing to the implementation of the CFP. That's why we need to continue supporting them and to do more to fund them, to create them and consolidate them all across the EU. We also need to do this in those member states where primary production has remained fragmented between aquaculture and artisanal fisheries. When we have strong producer organisations, we can improve the prosperity of coastal communities, and we can improve the position of fishers in the supply chain. There are certain producer organisations that have certain functions but cannot be considered officially POs as a result of this regulation. That's, for example, the cofradías, the guilds. We also need to recognise these. Now, in relation to rules for placing on the market, in 2013, according to the Commission's assessment, these rules were applied, and this led to added value. However, we need to take this opportunity with this report to simplify and streamline and modernise these rules. We also need to improve compliance and controls, because it's different in different member states. This is something that's been seen. We're also lacking in certain areas. Therefore, we need to demand from the European Commission that there are rules which will allow for harmonised application of these rules across the EU. Now, consumer information. For the CMO to meet its aims, consumers need to be informed. There needs to be marketing campaigns, information campaigns, so people can be aware of the benefits of these products as very healthy products. People also need to understand the labels, and we need to ensure that consumers can take informed decisions. We need to improve traceability, transparency, and have a labelling system which is adequate. We need to ensure trustworthy information, and this will help fight against fraud and IUU fishing. This is important for both processed and fresh products. The European Commission, in its consultations, received reports that said that certain information requirements for consumers had not been met in quite a few member states. I also want to say that application across the EU is considered to be unequal. This is the result of a range of different points. And labelling should provide a clear description of the produce, and when there's substitutes which are increasingly frequent in the market, we need to make clear about this. There's often images used which make people believe that there are fishery products involved in a product, and we need to continue with the application of competition rules, and this is obviously has an impact on quantities being placed on the market and has an impact on prices. We also need to ensure that conservation requirements are met with. We also need to fight waste, and we need to support competition in this area. Collective entities which are not recognised as POs will not benefit from certain rules under this regulation. Now, this is another reason why we need to recognise these cofradías and other organisations to be recognised as POs when they aren't. This is something we've called for repeatedly. Now, finally, we need to underscore the importance of the European Market Observatory for Fisheries and Aquaculture, EUMOFA. This is very important, providing information for operators on the market, for research bodies, and a range of different bodies and the public in general. It increases information available to operators and consumers. We need to improve its analysis. It needs to be extended to a range of different countries, and we need to have better digital tools which are more intuitive. This will lead to higher levels of access for all citizens. Thank you very much.
Tak til Izaskun. Så giver jeg Marto ordet.
Thank you, and I'd like to give the floor to Marta. Thank you, Chair, and thank you to Izaskun, the Rapporteur, for this report. In general terms, I support these. Now, 3 points on producer organisations. I think we share that POs are absolutely vital to meet the aims of CFP and CMO regulation. They also lead to better information, better management, better production. They limit environmental impact. They focus on quality. They raise awareness. So we need to strengthen and support POs, as the rapporteur highlights. There's one thing I would like to highlight in relation to the funds in the EMFAF. In the negotiations, we said that the funding for production plans could be a tool which is absolutely vital and is compulsory, and that's something that wasn't accepted, and that means that currently there's huge differences between member states in relation to funding available for these plans. Certain producer organisations receive funds which are 10 times higher than others. So I think we need to try and ensure equity across the EU. There's another point where we have figures on application of the CMO. These show that the creation of producer organisations has not been too successful, perhaps for a number of reasons. Firstly, it's complex when you have to contract people who know how to do this, and it's not always feasible for small-scale producers. There's also, it's not clear about the different criteria to be used for the POs, and there's also legal uncertainty. So I'd like to highlight something which is, if that's going to said, and I've said it time and time again, that's there are organisations which have a long history which represent producers' organisations, the cofradías or the fishers' guilds in Spain. They have an absolutely vital role, and these will need to be recognised, and they need to receive support from the Fisheries Fund. The Commission's report even mentions the cofradías. They recognise that they have a role which is similar to POs, but the Commission is not suggesting changing the CMO regulation to allow cofradías to be recognised as POs. I think we need to think about this and come up with a solution. In terms of rules for placing products on the market, this is a fantastic tool to ensure equality of conditions both in the EU and for imports into the EU. Perhaps these rules could be extended to other areas, not just technical standards, for example, environmental and social conditions. And our final point in relation to information for consumers, fully echo comments from Izaskun. all products sold in the EU market should meet the same rules, irrespective of where they come from. We need to also guarantee traceability for all products. This is absolutely vital so we can ensure equality of conditions between national operators and operators from outside the EU. Thank you. Thank you, Chair. I echo the comments about this report. I think it's a good report about the CMO regulation. The CMO is one of the areas that's best worked out of the CFP, but there are certain points that we need to improve. But I do think the CMO has been reasonable. It's been good. So I think the points that have been highlighted in the report are good. So I'd like to congratulate Izaskun for this report. I think we probably agree on many points with Izaskun and Gabriel Mato. We are Spanish and we understand the difficulties that cofradías, the fishers guilds, have, the fact that they're not recognised under the CMO as a PO. We need to have this recognition. So that's why we highlight it time and time again, and I echo that demand for cofradías to be recognised as POs. They are systematically excluded from the CMO. We shouldn't exclude a legal entity which is recognised in many different countries. So they are the largest fleet in the European Union, so something needs to change there. So I echo that demand. Another point, I think we need to look at why they are not so developed in other countries. I think they really are the backbone of the fisheries industry, but they don't have the sway that they should have in the sector. I also agree on the points made about labelling. I think labelling and the description of product these are not understood correctly by consumers, and people don't know what they are. There's the FAO regions which are identified on the products, and people don't understand, the Bay of Biscay or Portuguese waters. People don't understand what's on these labels, so we need to look at that, whether that's best done under this regulation or others. I think we can improve that. Now, traceability, thank you to Izaskun for the work done in controls and traceability. She had identified this and she's trying to improve traceability. I think it's a good agreement. I think both of us would have liked to have gone a little bit further. Perhaps others would agree with that. But I think with time we can improve we can work towards the full traceability that we want to see in this area. I think the CMO needs to be able to respond to the crisis as well. It should have a crisis mechanism that could be improved. There's also a few points in relation to the farm-to-fork strategy which have not been developed significantly in this sector. I think there's points that could be introduced there under the CMO regulation as well. But thank you to Izaskun. I think it's a fantastic report. Thank you.
Miranda?
Tak, President. Bueno, en primer lugar quería
Well, firstly, I'd like to congratulate Izaskun for this report. It addresses the key questions for the fisheries sector and the aquaculture sector. And this is something, a very important sector in my region and my country. There's a few points we'd like to highlight in this area, and I think have been conveyed by the Federation of Galician Cofradías and also the Spanish Association for Cofradías. We want to see the recognition of cofradías. They are a part of the sector. They are not-for-profit organizations. They're recognized by the Spanish state and by the autonomous communities in Spain where there are cofradías. They work with the necessary authorities in this area. They're absolutely vital. They are the backbone of the fisheries sector. I'd love you to come and visit. For those who haven't been, I think a lot of you already had, come, depending in the morning or in the afternoon, and come and understand, come to any Galician port and look at the dynamism that exists under these cofradias. And it's unbelievable that they can't access European funds in this, but they can't access to the necessary funds, so we need to address this issue. I also want to say that the cofradias have a vital role in the sustainability of fisheries, and so it's important to recognise them. It's not just a problem for the European Commission, it's also a problem for the Spanish authorities, and this has been said in a number of meetings. The Spanish rules need to change. There's elections on Sunday, and we're still going to be asking the new government to address it, whatever government is elected. We need to change the rules so that then the European Commission can recognise these organisations, and this is something that the Commission has told us repeatedly. Now is the time to do it. The cofradias have had an essential role in the crisis. They've provided food for people. They've provided food at very low prices. They provide certification services, and they also provide information about origin. Now, in relation to information, I think I would echo the comments of my previous speakers. We need to be much more specific. When we look at a particular fishing ground, the FAO zone is difficult to recognise. Only those who work on fisheries on a daily basis really understand what that means, and that's because we've studied it. It's not easy to understand this information. We have to put when it's been captured, how it's been raised, if it's a particular type of produce, when was it when it was frozen, and we need to know when it was first frozen, and now fishing nets as well. If there are smaller nets, so what type of nets? I think this is a very important point as well, and also the scientific denomination as well. I think we need to be more specific at times. The origin of the produce is important as well. There should be also, we want to see harmonised reports across the member states, because this information needs to be clear and complete and trustworthy and harmonised, because if not, then we are breaking the law. And this is something that's happening with many products. For example, there's Nutri-Score, and this was just, it doesn't work. It's scandalous what they say. It looks like a fish, but it's not.
Tak, og Conte.
Thank you, Ms. Conte.
Grazie Presidente e grazie alla relatrice Bilbao per
Yes, thank you. And thank you, Bilbao, the rapporteur, for this report on the CMOs. I think this is more important. I mean, consumers want to know increasingly. They want to know what they're eating. And people are becoming more aware of the need to look at the ingredients that should be on the labels. Particularly with frozen fish, people want to know where it came from. In fact, the origin of fish is basic information that consumers are looking for. And it often is what you need to know to determine if it's a high-quality product. So there has to be a guarantee that there will be information to the consumer, better information. And traceability of fisheries also needs to be improved, including covering agriculture or aquaculture. So there has to be a strengthened system of traceability. That's certainly one of the benefits of the updated Common Market Organization. There has to be better implementation of the CMO as well. And we also need to have to continue our fight against illegal and unreported fishing, IUU. It's something that's got to be clear to consumers in terms of the information. But this shouldn't be an overly heavy burden on producers. And also, you have to look at the size of the labels and see how much information can be put on the labels. You've got to also take a look at the producer organizations, then their role. That they're going to be key to making sure that the sector develops correctly for the activities in themselves, but also when it comes to trying to meet the common fisheries policies goals in terms of developing our coastal regions. The POs play a very important role in local economies. So we think we have to make sure that we do give a good, authentic representation which properly defends the interests of fishermen. That's why I want to make sure that there is more support given to the producers' organizations and that their potential is fully developed. At the same time, in our amendments, we've put forward measures to try and to improve just that. Thank you.
Millerman.
Gracias, presidente.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you to Izaskun. I've read the report and it's very interesting. Very interesting looking at the CMO implementation in this area. I echo comments made by my colleagues that we need to have harmonised implementation. There seem to be major differences. We need to ensure that we can safeguard the equality of conditions, the level playing field that exists across the single market. And I'd like to focus on something that's already been mentioned by Gabriel Mato, and it's something of great interest to me in Galicia, and it's something I've been mentioning for many years. We need to have the recognition of the cofradías. They need to be recognised as producer organisations. They need to be eligible entities to receive European funds. Now, the explanatory memorandum says that it's important that they are recognised. We need to recognise the existing bodies in member states that conduct a role similar to producer organisations, so that are cofradías. So this committee and this House has repeatedly mentioned this point. We need to ensure that they are considered equivalent as POs. I spoke to Ms. Bichima a few months ago in this committee, so I'm very grateful that Izaskun going to mention this under point 6, but I will send in an amendment to make it more explicit. And there's another important point I'd like to mention: consumer information. I think that labelling is a very important point here. I don't know if I agree that it's vital for the fight against IUU fishing. The new control regulation already includes provisions to strengthen traceability of all fisheries produce via the catch system, looking at imports, and this will help us in our fight against IUU fishing. Having adequate labelling is very important to fight food fraud, and it's also important for transparency. It provides more information for consumers. Now, with that in mind, I think there is unfair commercial practices which could lead to confusion and could be to the detriment of the consumers. Now, in point 13, the rapporteur recognised this, but I will send in an amendment to try and strengthen the language on this point. I think the proposed legislative framework for sustainable food systems that are referred to and that the Commission will approve should address this issue of food fraud. When vegetable products are being sold as fisheries produce. Another point of this legislative framework should be the inclusion of information about how important fish is in a human diet. Given the health benefits, this should be extended across the EU, and we should reduce VAT levels on aquaculture produce. This is something that should be done in Spain. We're seeing a significant drop in fisheries produce. They're seeing a 17% drop over recent years in Spain, but this is something that's been seen across the EU. Reducing VAT rates would be important to provide incentive for the market. Now, the EU MOFA is also important as well, and this is points 16, 17 and 22. Now, the information that I've received is that the EU MOFA should distinguish market analysis for the different countries because there's different consumption habits, but there isn't this distinction in the UMOFA reports. Now, a final point, I'd like to refer to recital B. There's a language point and a content point here. It refers to a transition period during which time these rules will apply. Well, it wouldn't be during the transition period, it would be after the transition period. It says during, it's not during, but it should be after the transition period. The new rules, the new control rules there should be a transition period for 2 years, and then the new control rules applied. And I don't think the timelines are too long. I know there's groups wanted longer timelines, other ones shorter timelines. I think we found a compromise, so I wouldn't agree on that. Now, in talking about amendments as well, I think the deadline for amendments is the 20th or so of July, but I think given the complexity of this report, I think it would be better to push the amendment deadline further back to the 1st of September. So it's a modest suggestion to have us a bit of time over the summer to look at this.
Obrigada, Sr. Presidente.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to begin by thanking Izaskun for this excellent report. It's a very good and own initiative report. At times, people water down on initiative reports, but I think this is a very important report for the political signal that it sends. It's something important for the future of fisheries and aquaculture. Now, I'd like to focus on labelling. Labelling is an extremely important issue. Now, there is no silver bullet for all problems, but it's very important to increase measures which can improve labelling. That can lead to higher levels of transparency in the market and improve the traceability of products. It won't solve all our problems, but it is an important point. By increasing traceability and transparency in the market, this will always be for the benefit of consumers. It will benefit from the protect them from the pirates, if you will, that exist in the area of fisheries and aquaculture. Now, on consumers, I think consumers have the right and also the obligation to understand what they are eating. They need to understand the impact that it has on social issues and environmental issues. Consumers should have access to this information. I don't want to create a nanny state for consumers, but I think on a few points we should also look at what is really important for consumers. And the references to the FAO zones, well, it's possibly not that relevant, that information. Last year we had a fisheries mission to Portugal, and Chair, you were there with us, if I don't misremember, but I think there's some of our colleagues from the ECR were with us as well. It was last year we had this mission to Portugal. One of the projects that we saw was looking at labelling. That project identified some important points that people we wanted to identify the fishes in relation to information on the labels, so people could understand the fishes and the sector better, so people could understand what people were really interested in. So there's certain important points for labelling, but they're not necessarily those points that we think are relevant. Maybe scientific points, well, that is important, but is it really that important for the label, for the consumer? So I think we need to look at this so we can try and create a more effective label, try and improve awareness for consumers, and also build that link between those who are producing and those who are consuming. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Thank you to the Rapporteur. There's been a number of points already mentioned. There's competition between artisanal fisheries and aquaculture. I can see that in the report we are ensuring fair competition for fishers and aquaculture producers, but we need to ensure that artisanal coastal fisheries still remains, and that's an important point. And labelling is very important. It's something we've spoken about extensively already today. We really need to have labels which are very precise. I think this should be extended to processed products as well. There's something I've heard mentioned, and it surprised me, the fact that people are talking about food fraud. When I buy fish fingers, for example, and it says vegan. Well, if a fish finger is vegan, then it can't be fish in there. So I think this is an important point. we're not misleading consumers. And we're talking a lot about import of foreign fish. To avoid the import of foreign fish, we can eat lesser known species. For instance, in my region, there's certain species that aren't that well known. I think we can do this. I think we need to raise awareness amongst consumers on this. This will allow us to import less. If we want to import less fish, there are vegetarian alternatives as well, and that's something that could be further developed. In terms of labelling, I think it's also important to mention the fisheries techniques which are used and understand how how fish are caught, and also look at animal well-being as well. Thank you.
Tak til skyordføreren, og så har vi fra...
Yes, thank you. And we've heard from the shadow rapporteurs now. Now, Nikolai will have the floor.
I think everything has been said already.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry. Hello, good morning to everybody. Many thanks for giving us the floor. We are quite happy to notice that this report reflects almost in all points what the report which was presented by the Commission in February 21st with the whole package regarding the CMO regulation. We do notice the different, I would say, positive contribution of the CMO to the functioning of the market of fisheries and aquaculture products. And we do also acknowledge that the report identifies some shortcomings and needs for improvement, which we were also identified by us in the Commission report presented, as I said. So there are, I will say, three strands, three points where we have, you have identified these shortcomings. The report identifies these shortcomings is the consumer information and labeling, the market transparency and traceability, and the enlarging of PO's recognition to other collective organizations. I will go one by one rapidly. So we do share the view that there are some shortcomings, in particular in the implementation of the provisions on consumer information in labeling. It does not only concern harmonization, but also compliance with these rules, in particular on mandatory consumer information. In the first half of 2023, now, the Commission has initiated a monitoring process exercise on all Member States to assess how and to what extent Member States' competent authorities carried out controls on the implementation of consumer information by seafood retailers. This was following the problems which we have identified in our report, but also through reports we have received from other sources the period before. So we have started this exercise to check and to assess how Member States are implementing the obligations for consumer information under the CMO. Of course, based on this exercise, the Commission will decide what will be the appropriate measures to take after we assess the results. On timing, I will say it's towards the end of the year where we will have the first results of this exercise. We do also appreciate that the line between commercial communication and mislabeling is of concern for the sector, in particular with regard to substitute products. There were other precedents in the food sector, and we have seen that they were adequately addressed, and this concern will be given the necessary attention by the Commission services. I would like also here to underline that we are on the process of preparing a legislative proposal, which is the Sustainable Food System Framework, which we believe is going to be presented by quarter 2023, which will aim to promote policy coherence in the EU level and mainstreaming sustainability in all food-related policies. And consumer information and labeling is only one of the possible building blocks under consideration for this framework. We do believe that we will try to have a pragmatic approach which will limit the burdens for operators on the sustainability labeling. And of course, I have heard a lot about traceability, how much important traceability is. It is a building block. When we are talking about labeling and consumer information, we should not forget traceability. However, traceability is not under the Common Market Organization, it's under the control regulation. But we do believe that it's a pillar. So we do welcome that the control regulation is finally revised and share the view that it will increase transparency, reliability, and completeness of information along the value chain. In particular, the extension of the traceability requirements for the processed products. So we cannot have robust consumer information without an effective, as I said, traceability system. We also welcome the appreciation of the report regarding our European Market Observatory for Fisheries and Aquaculture products. It is indeed a reference market observatory, and there is no any other alternative at EU level. We also take note of your recommendation to promote its use among member states, although our impression is that this is already widely relied upon to inform policy making across member states, but we are continuing to have this tool as I would say, as possible to the top, to the level which is expected. And I will come to the last point, which is about producers' organizations. I heard about the point on cofradías. We do have already and explained in previous occasions that there are numerous collective bodies of producers in the EU, such as cofradías in Spain or Prodomis in France, which they are playing a role in presenting and organizing the fishing sector. However, the reason why the CMO regulation limits the access to specific market measures, the production and marketing plans, as we call them under the CMO, and the financial support to recognize producer organizations is the fact that POs, they fulfill a clearly defined task and that they are key for the implementation of the common fisheries policy objectives. And we do believe that they must comply with the same criteria for their recognition and their functioning across the EU, which is, and I heard it several times, an essential element to guarantee level playing field. We have already said it several times. Currently, in the CMO regulation, there is nothing in the regulation to prevent a cofradia or a prodomi to submit a request for recognition under the producer organization. I would like to remind and underline that recognition is not at the Commission level. It's at the member state level. They define the criteria and they can actually support the cofradias in order to become recognized producer organizations. So currently, there is no any in the legal framework as CMO is today. So we also, of course, we are available to support the member states in order to go for this road, okay, and to see how it goes. I have heard also a lot about financing, compulsory financing before with EMFF and not compulsory financing with MFAF. Actually, we have analyzed the new MFAF operational programs. There is no difference between the compulsory and the non-compulsory funding in this programming period. The difference and the problem is the uneven level of financing. But this, again, it's at the member states. The member states are deciding how much they are going to give under the specific measure to the producer organization. We are noticing member states like Spain, France, where they do have substantive financing for their producer organizations. Producer organizations, they have very good production and marketing plans, and their system works very, very well. We are noticing other member states, which is limited, but this is, again, as I said, is a member state decision. Here I would like to say that the opportunity to enlarge producer organization status to already existing collective bodies of producers could be assessed in a case of a possible revision of the CMO regulation if it is envisaged in the future. So what I'm saying here today is that if there is a decision to revise Common Market Organization regulation, in the evaluation and the impact assessment, we can assess the impact of such extension of recognition to cofradias and prodomis. So we also believe, and I'm finished with this, the Commission is also of the opinion that the aquaculture sector and the small-scale coastal fisheries producers, They remain too scattered and will benefit from a larger integration within the producer organization. All concerned member states were encouraged to give priorities to both categories of operators, small scale and aquaculture, including in terms of financial resources. We have noticed some progress in the operational programs, but still there are things to be done. So we agree that it requires a continuous attention in support. Thank you very much.
Tak til kommissionen, og så Izaskun.
Yes, thank you, Commission. Now I'd like to give the floor to the Rapporteur.
Te voy a empezar agradeciendo.
Yes, thank you. I'd like to begin by thanking the Commission for their work. They're looking at the different obligations that are to be covered by the different member states, and then the fact that there will be health measures introduced. Now, this isn't perhaps the proper time to say this, but nonetheless, we agree with the Commission. We agree that there has to be an improvement of traceability and labeling, and we'll be putting also this concept of healthy foods into this. But we want to ask whether this is really something that should go with a measure covering quota management. And when you've got the labeling and that part, how does that tie in with the quotas? I mean, that's an issue which the Commission itself has touched upon. At the present time, we're not really coming up with new frameworks, but we're just working with the existing models. Now, when it comes to the recognition of cofradías, or the guilds, I think that was fairly clear. Now, in there, if you look at point 24, what we say is that, well, we make a call, in fact, saying that if the criteria for recognition of, that the criteria for recognizing producer organizations should be tweaked so that they can cover organizations such as guilds and cofradías in Spain's case. So we would like to thank you. I think the committee's members agree that we do need to strengthen the role of producers' organizations for the important role that they play. And there does have to be harmonization of the rules at the European level. I think this report can help. Also, we want to stress, again, the recognition of cofradías, better labeling. That's a right of consumers. It's also an opportunity for fishers who are doing it right in Europe can get the highlight on the quality products they produce. There is concern. To reply to what Mrs. Rose said, and that there will be, if you look at some of these images here, if you look at, this is in Hungary, well, you can look at pizza. It's vegetarian pizza, but it says pizza with a tuna sauce on it. I mean, as if it were fish, but it's not fish. So we'll show you a lot of other examples of this too. That's what's occurring in the marketplace. It's fraud. I mean, this is an important products are fish, and we should very clearly indicate what is fish and what is not fish. Now, in this light, in the Fisheries Committee, we've also organized a day where we'll be addressing this very issue. I think it's going to be very interesting. Now, okay, harmonized application, look at vegetarian products, look at the role of the EU MOFA. I think that, as I said, we've got to do more to make sure that the information is available digitally, more widely available. So I think there are a lot of areas where we all are on the same page here. And Mr. Millen, I think, said some things too. One word that does need to be changed, indeed, in the implementation of the control mechanisms, where you've got the labeling, you've got the 2 hours, or rather the 2 years time frame. And what Mr. Moses said correctly, that I said it was longer than it should be. Well, I mean, I've been saying the same thing for 14 years. There shouldn't be anything new that I said that. I say that every time there's the control mechanism. Now, Mr. Mo said that he's pleased. Well, then that's great. We have different positions there. And we will continue on that front. But I hope, actually, perhaps someday that will change, and I'll actually convince Mr. Mons before our time here is up. Thank you.
Tak til Izaskun.
Thank you very much, Ms. Bilbao.
Hemos trabajado con la secretaria.
Yes, well, we did work with the Secretariat, in fact, to try and make sure that we did have a time frame for the amendment so that this is something that could be approved quickly. So I would perhaps turn to everyone to be very, very rapid and submit your amendments in the coming week. If we do that, then we'll be able to vote on this in November, unless the Secretariat tells us that there's a bit more flexibility and we could extend the deadline. That would solve the problem too.
Det var faktisk det, jeg skulle til at spørge om.
Yes, thank you. Well, indeed, that was what I was going to suggest, that we might take a look at the deadline for amendments into September. The Secretariat said that could work. That should be all right. So if we put the date out to the 1st of, or the start of September, would that be okay for everyone? If we put off the deadline for the submission of amendments to the start of September, apparently? Well, if the Secretariat can ensure us that we can still vote on this report in the given with a given time schedule, that's fine with us.
Hemos establecido que podemos votar a finales de noviembre.
Yes, well, the goal is to vote at the end of November. So I think we have the 4th of September then for the deadline for the submission of amendments, if that's all right.
Sorry. We decide the 4th September at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. Thank you.